Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. Everybody always wants to play the popular specs. Everyone wants to play the most popular builds out there because, well, they must be popular for a reason. Sometimes something broken, busted, or super fun ends up becoming a playstyle that a lot of people naturally gravitate towards. I, on the other hand, have always enjoyed the idea of underdog specs. Specs that are not super popular, that are not enjoyed by a lot of players, but I've always felt like just because no one plays them doesn't mean there's not some kind of a hidden potential in their playstyle. In this video, I decided to put together 5 specs in the game Shadowlands right now using the data we have collected from the logs as well as the Reddit IO with all the players doing all their Mythic Plus runs. We have actual data to take a look at which specs are being played the least, which ones are underrepresented, and which ones could hold some significant potential at some point in this expansion. I should also add this, just because these specs are least played does not necessarily mean that they are lacking in some way. Some of these playstyles can shine in very specific niche situations. They just don't fit the current mold and the meta of what we are getting to experience right now when it comes to the current raids as well as the dungeon PvE environment. There's a better chance that other specs simply fit that mold slightly better, and maybe we're just waiting and sleeping on these specs and they're going to be dormant until some kind of a raid or some kind of a fight will come out where it'll be their time to shine. So let's take a look at the least played specs available right now so far in Shadowlands. First spec on this list is going to take a number 5 spot, is going to end up being the Arcane Mage. Now, Arcane is something that I've actually very much enjoyed back in BFA, and I was super excited about Arcane's improvements going into this expansion. Blizzard did a lot back in the beta and the alpha, cleaning up a lot of the GCD issues that Arcane has had, and I felt like they've much greatly improved the AoE potential of this spec, where in the past it felt like you had to go really the extra mile just to be competitive or even average DPS. Now just going through a rotation in an AoE situation, as long as you have the mana, generally allows you to keep up with everyone. It hasn't become the meta spec since Fire Mage has been taken off recently, but the Arcane Mage still is a very strong and potent spec, finding a lot of value when it comes to PvP, but also in some PvE specific scenarios. It is in a much better spot than it was in the previous expansion. Currently, I'm playing my Arcane Mage as a Kyrian, trying to pair together the 30-second ability with the Kyrian, extra arcane damage on top of explosive bursts in short moments, and so far I've actually been really enjoying it. I'm still playing around with Arcane, and I would love to get the Scarab to max level and try out some of the different legendaries that work with it, because those were super enjoyable and very powerful back on the beta. Another spec that ends up finding itself on this list is going to be Frost Death Knight. I mean, of course this is going to happen to Frost. Unholy is just blasting everybody out of the water. So, of course, all those Death Knights that would have played Frost in the past are now checking out Unholy. So Frost is being kind of left in the limelight a little bit, but it still is a very powerful spec, and with very specific legendaries and setups, you actually can put out quite a bit of damage. In fact, I have a Death Knight right now. I paired him together with the Necrolord Covenant, which I feel fits really well into the 2-minute setup, where 1 minute I'll have Pillar of Frost together with the extra helping hand from Maldraxxus, but then the others will be just me blasting obliterates into my enemy with a massive 2-hander. Big fan of the fact that Blizzard made the 2-hander playstyle somehow work. Of course, it's always been a bit finicky when it comes to beta and balancing the 2-hander versus the 1-hander dual-wield playstyle, but I'm glad that Blizzard at least attempted it. And while not a lot of people are checking out Frost, I feel people are sleeping on this spec because it can do some insane AoE damage, particularly because of the massive Dragon Strike that you can do, where Frosty Dragon just bombards the enemies, feeding off of the very powerful strength buffs that you can kind of overlap together with your character, allows for a very explosive burst situation on single target, but most importantly where it shines is in the massive AoE once enemies are clumped up. Plus, Frost has a couple good legendaries that are now actually taken off in PvP, so while Unholy might be dominating when it comes to raids and dungeons, it does look like Frost actually does shine in some places. Next spec on the list is going to be Demonology, another spec that I actually very much enjoyed back in the beta. I know, everybody's playing Affliction, and even Destruction on the beta had a very interesting playstyle where you just summoned a billion Infernals, but even back in the beta, Demonology actually saw a lot of play. Very similar to Arcane Mages, at one point they were actually pretty popular. The amount of AoE damage that we're able to do back in the beta was actually quite nuts, and the amount of different synergies they had with legendaries was actually outstanding. You had a couple different playstyles, from a massive tyrant playstyle, then you had a demon doggos playstyle where your demon doggos could just do blasting damage, billion imps could be summoned with legendaries, and all those things are still there in potential. I just think Affliction has had a much easier time doing majority of the content, but I cannot wait to level up a warlock myself and really sink my teeth into Demonology. I think in AoE situations, particularly Mythic Pluses with certain legendaries, it could potentially have a very powerful setup, blasting through mobs with imps, summoning powerful demons left and right, and I actually cannot wait to try it on single target as well. I do wonder what kind of legendaries are going to be paired with, but right now I think I'm going to try that as a Necrolord. Fourth spec on this list, second to the least popular, is going to be Survival Hunter. I feel like this one is kind of expected. Not a lot of people really check out Survival unless you primarily PvP. Survival is this weird oddball child of the Hunter class, two of them being ranged, with Marksman being quite dominant in terms of the damage output, Beast Mastery being the more mobile but maybe a little bit less in damage, since your actual spec legendaries are not as good as a class specific legendary. The one where you throw down Tar Trap and throw the flare in it, that one that was really busted on the beta that got nerfed a billion times. Yeah, apparently that one is the best for Beast Mastery, and none of the Beast Mastery specific ones. Blizzard probably should get on that. But then we have Survival, which is a melee counterpart, where most people expect a range class. Now you're a melee. However, you do have a melee with a lot of range capabilities. You can dot enemies from afar, nade them from afar, throw chakras from afar, pet kick them in from afar. You could disengage and harpoon, but you are still going to be a melee, which makes you kind of like an interesting hybrid kind of playstyle where you can do some range, some melee, but in the end you are going to be at the boss's toes with the rogues and the warriors. The one potential that I always thought Survival would have is the Mythic Pluses. Once we are, and eventually we will get to the point where we're pulling massive trash bags with actual AoE uncapped. Well, most classes are capped, but Survival is one of those that actually doesn't have any AoE caps. If you land those wildfire bombs at a nice angle, cleaving as many enemies as possible, every enemy can actually get tagged by the wildfire bomb. And that combined together with a legendary for even more mini wildfire bombs when you wildfire bomb the enemy, that's just a lot of AoE potential that was super enjoyable back in the beta. So I think Survival might actually have some valid possibilities in the future once someone gives them a real try and allows Survival Hunters to nab pieces of gear from within raids and even Mythic Pluses. But until people give it a go, I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of Survival Hunters anytime soon. And finally, we have ourselves Assassination. This one makes all the sense in the world. Subtlety is a new popular kid in Skull, able to dominate in PvP and do quite well in PvE, particularly in single target. Then there's Outlaw, and that one is enjoyed by a lot of players, particularly for AoE, but also quite a solid choice for the current raid tier. So honestly, you could just play one spec for both single target and raid fights. And Assassination is the third spec out of the list, like the other specs in this list. Survival, we have ourselves Arcane, Demonology. There's always going to be that red-headed stepchild in the family, and Assassination just turns out to be the one with the least representation. However, unlike the other specs, which have potential, my fear is Assassination might actually not have too much in terms of the output. They're just simply under-tuned, and no matter the amount of tuning the Blizzard can do, we'll just have to wait until further better tuning may come to the spec in order to actually start seeing them here and there. As much fun as the spec is, with all the dots and the bleeds and the cool legendaries that can work with it, I feel like Survival is more popular than when it comes to Assassination, PvE content. It's actually kind of crazy that we're seeing them literally everywhere in BFA, but as soon as the new expansion rolled out, they all literally pressed vanished and they haven't unstealthed. So hopefully we'll see some of them rearing their assassinating heads at a later time in maybe near future patches or in the whole new tier. Maybe then Blizzard could do something to bring him out of their shell, but right now we're just not seeing any assassination rogues anywhere. So that's going to be the list we have from all the data collected from the PvE side of the game. Not talking about PvP at all in this video, but these are the, not the most, the least represented specs when it comes to their opportunities and how many people are trying them within Shadowlands so far. Some of you guys are huge fans of underdogs like me, and maybe you were looking for something unique and niche to get into, and these might be some of the specs you could explore in the near future. They do have some really strong counterparts, so even if you try some Arcane, Demonology, and Survival, I feel like you'll always be able to bounce back to a popular strong spec afterwards. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see all of you guys in another one.